Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Del. We're going to go deep today, aren't we?
We are. Well, this is a follow-on from last week. So last week we talked about change, our expectations about our partner changing, our expectations that they don't change, or our expectations of that life shouldn't be changing, or what are all those things. But what I wanted to talk about today is that obviously change is inevitable. We know that, and about our mindset, how we look at change, how we handle adversity, how we move with, as you know, we both went to USM, so as Ron would say, the divine unknown, embracing the divine unknown instead of that sort of always anticipating that things stay the same, which is the one constant is we know it doesn't, it changes. So
The only constant there is the change is happening. So, yeah, absolutely the case. Part of the journey.
that and death and taxes. But other than that,
Well,
everything else changes.
yeah.
The others don't change, but for now, that's what they do. So
Yes, indeed.
yeah, so I know I mentioned last week about how I find it so funny that as human beings we just resist change. We want to know what's happening. We want the predictability. And it occurred to me a while back, because me too, but it
Mhm.
occurred to me a while back because I've been through so many changes, and just even, how I live. I always, I've lived in Malibu now for over 30 years, 30 years. And I always say that, I've gone from living in a mansion to living in a mobile home, but I'm lucky
Mhm.
enough to have seen Malibu from all those angles. And when I stopped looking at life in the sense of, I don't want things to change, I want my comfort level to stay where it is. And I saw it, I was able to pull back enough and say, you know what, when I die, I want to like skid into my grave and go, what a hell of a ride that was. Just to sort of crawl there really slowly and safely and go, phew, I got here without too many changes. What a boring way to go.
Absolutely.
So,
That's the thing is that it's funny to go back to USM for a moment as well. One of the other quotes I love from Ron, which I used a lot in our conversations about, how you relate to the issue is the issue.
yes.
And so, because change is happening all the time, it's really how we relate to it's the key thing here. Because the thing is, like the title says, everything happens is for us, not against us. That's a big ask for a lot of people,
Hmm.
and it was for me. And I really got to the point now, and especially because of the spiritual work I've been doing for many years, is I tend to have this duality of experience or duality of perception. Is that oftentimes I look through life and something happens, and my immediate reaction will be the very human one, like I'm in it and I'm upset by it and triggered by it. And then part of me like switches gears almost immediately now, where I just step back to a bigger place, which you maybe call spiritual, whatever you would call it. And I look at it and go, that's interesting. And I sort of have much less emotional investment in it being wrong or being different.
Hmm.
And I'm noticing that for one thing, it's a whole lot easier. But secondly, is there's actually I almost want to gently say like a joy and amusement that shows up.
So,
And so the thing about being, say again,
no, you say it again. There's almost a what shows up?
almost like a joy and an amusement shows up.
Yeah.
Like the part of me that's not so invested or attached.
Hmm.
Yes, I'm talking about duality here in a sense. Is the sense of just being present to the fact that that's interesting. So what do I do with that? And one of my other teachers talks about how this when things happen to us is when you're on the path of evolution. The way he puts it is you say well, you look at things though, and it happens when you have a car crash or a job change or whatever it is. Say it's an interesting evolutionary experience. Because when you say that, it sounds so silly, but the truth is, it is evolutionary. Oftentimes, something happens to us, or happens in front of us, happens around us, and we can can not always have to, but can change based on it.
Yeah.
So the question then becomes, how easily do we adapt? How easily do we see through the lens of it's for us, not against us? That's the big ask in this podcast episode.
Yeah, and I think, again, 100%, this is not a spiritual bypass by any means. I'm very firmly, I believe that, once we're dead, we are 100% spiritual, so let's not rush it. While we are on this earth, we are both
Absolutely.
spiritual and human rolled into one. And there's a reason why we incarnate into this earth. There's a reason why we have human emotions, normal human emotions. And I believe it's part of our evolution, and we should honor what we're feeling and going through. But I love what you said, which is true. Usually the impulse, the reaction we first have when something life changing happens is to go into that human, oh my God, how do I cope? How do I, deal with this? This is dreadful, whatever, whatever. But when we do know that, and again, not to rush the process, but to know that whatever happens, there is a gift in it. And it doesn't mean
Mm,
the situation is better. It just means even in the most horrific, horrendous, sad, painful experience, we get a gift of something. We either get the gift of seeing our resilience or of seeing our innate well-being, that over time we do rise to the top again, that we can continue and strive and live and be happy again. um, I mean, I'm so used to now, and it's not a spiritual bypass, but last week I went through a loss. I was over in the UK, and we had to realize, come to some realizations about a family situation, which was a loss for me, a huge loss on many, many levels.
mhm,
But that loss only lasted for a little bit. What ends up happening is the gifts start bubbling up in me. I don't even have to look for them; they just
mhm.
bubble up. It's like, oh, but see the opening that this provides here. See the growth that it provides here. See that this, and it just bubbles up. So that feeling of loss just ends up sort of dissipating. It's not a pushing it down and forcing it down and doing, as I said, the spiritual bypass. It's just that it's natural that with
Yeah.
change comes new experience, new depths of understanding. Um,
Mhm.
it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful opportunity.
It is, like, and it is. I mean, what you're saying, what I've been saying as well, is it is kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily evolved, but certainly a more awakened or an understanding point of view of life. It isn't bypassing by any means, but it is a sense of, first of all, not taking things so personally and being reactive to everything. I talked about this recently in another conversation, about the difference between reactive versus responsive. And in a lot of ways, what happens when things happen to us or against us, we oftentimes get very reactive to that, and we sort of put up, we bristle and we get upset and defensive and that sort of thing. And frankly, we don't actually move with much grace. But if we start recognizing things are working for us, if something happens, we get to sort of dance with it in a way. It makes it easy to get through. And like you were saying, like you see more possibilities, you see new openings, which isn't a bypass. It's actually a more of a spatial awareness to see what's really going on in its limited capacity. It's not taking over everything, because that's the thing we do is when something happens, like everything else gets knocked out. If you're in a car accident, we don't think about dinner, we don't think about breakfast, we think about what happened in the moment, and we get stuck in that sometimes. So when we can expand ourselves in a sense to see that it's not the end of the world, because it isn't,
Mhm.
that it's manageable, then we can do something more constructive to change things or to evolve things or to resolve things even.
Yeah. It's so funny with I'd mentioned it last week, when my partner's house burnt down in the Wolsey fire, and there was 24 hours where I had been told my house had burnt down. So I went through that. Um, they said no, absolutely, we saw it burn down. So I was being told this. I was obviously not in Malibu at the time. I was a few hundred miles away, but I um, I went through a process of the initial of, oh my God, all the things I've lost. But so quickly my mind went to, oh, well, at least you don't have to get rid of all that, go through all that, stuff you want to give away and all those books that are just being, I started looking at the positive. Then 24
Mhm.
hours later, I was told, oh no, actually your house survived, but your boyfriend's house burnt down. And there was a moment of, really? My house survived? because I had processed it to the point where I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I've let go of everything. And all of a sudden it was like, no, actually, you've still got everything. So anyway, it was a funny moment, but I can also think back to, when I went through a divorce. I divorced through a time when it was the recession, and which was definitely not in my favor. And there was a moment where I thought, oh my God, woe is me. I've lost everything. But I tell you, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. If I had had what I call the cushy divorce, I would have never, ever discovered the depth of who I really am, the
Yeah.
resources that I was able to tap into that are innate within me that I hadn't had to tap into before. And so, as much as things can sometimes look as if it was bad timing, or oh my God, like I say, woe is me, there is, and maybe the gifts don't show up immediately. Maybe it's only on reflection, which was in my case, but there is always something that you can find that for me gives me peace. For me, makes has me let go of any past event and has me stay very much in the present moment.
That's the biggest gift. In some ways, like when you live life thinking everything happens to you, then you're going to start feeling like a pinball in a pinball machine.
Yeah,
You're going to bounce around, pushed around, flicked back, forward, and everything else, and you have no control, and you feel like a victim. And that is a very unempowered place to be. It's a very challenging place to be in terms of being able to respond or do anything positive. But when you start shifting into a place where life is working for you, you can see through the lens of, if it's for me, then what can I do with this? And like you were saying, which is beautiful, about becoming, I won't say creative, but becoming detached enough about your house and your possessions, you can see that it was saving you so much effort and stress. And I love the funny thing about the fact that you find you still have everything, and you're going, "Oh crap, I got the stress again," in a sense. But it's like it can be that unattached. That's one of the gifts of having a cooperative feeling for life.
yeah,
Because I think we have this thing oftentimes where people say, "Well, life is against me; it's always making life hard." It's like, is it really,
mm,
or are you just seeing it through the lens?
yeah,
But when you see life before you, when things don't go your way, you're not so upset about it. You become, oh, that's interesting. Or that's like, oh well, so much say la vie. If there's something bad, there's something good around somewhere else, so you can look somewhere else.
hmm,
But it is about really perception and responsiveness to what's happening that makes it work.
yeah, yeah. Two things that you're making me think of as you're talking there. One is that, for me, I think we only do have so much energy. And when we, you know, ex- use that energy in regret, in going over what's already happened, going over the past. Again, I'm not saying rush the mourning period. If you've experienced a severe loss of any type, honor it, honor the feelings that come up, but don't get stuck there. And
Yeah,
and I think when we keep rehashing, and when we coming from that mindset, as you say, of the victim mentality of this is, life is against me, why me, or all those things, we do stay stuck. And it's like I call it the bag of woe. It's that, sort of sack on our back, and it's like we pick up another stone and go, oh, another life dealt me this, and we just keep sticking that stone in that bag of woe. And before we know it, we're carrying that really heavy bag, and it accumulates, and we do end up feeling victimized because we keep reminding ourselves of everything that went wrong. That this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But when we have the ability to say, yes, this happened, it sucked, it did not feel good, I did not like it, but it's gone now, it's happened, and I know that, even if I can't see it today, that there is a bigger picture, and this somehow delivered a gift to me which will become clear to me sooner or later. And to
yeah,
just trust that, and to trust that, again, we keep talking about USM today. I keep remembering the ideal scenes that we used to do, and when we would imagine a future that we wanted, or an outcome we wanted, and we'd always say across the top, this or something better for the greatest good of all. And knowing
hmm,
that, yes, we can think that this is really, really good, this is really what we want. But when we hang on so tightly, believing this is all there is, not trusting that, the universe has something so much bigger and better for us. And,
right.
so again, it's that trust that Yeah, there's something that, that what we went through was necessary for our growth, our spiritual growth. And
which is part of the work, absolutely.
yeah,
But the thing I speak to, yeah, that thing about this is something better for the highest good. That one's definitely worked for me in some ways, where I definitely had realization that I was too limited in my thinking, and having that experience of, and that's the thing that I know for many people experience that they may not see it this lens yet, but now they do or can, is that oftentimes we look at life through the lens that this is the possibility we can have and nothing greater, nothing less. That's it, fixated on the one thing. And it's kind of like, and I know we both speak from spiritual terms, that the universe has been so much better in play, but if we don't let it in, it can't provide it. So being open to this or something better, it sounds so simplistic to say that, but by saying what we're saying is, this is my baseline. More than that, I'm open to, but certainly this would be great. So
yeah,
when something even better happens, it's almost like, even better, awesome.
yeah.
And you get to enjoy it, you know?
Well, sometimes we don't even stick. So I remember, again, going back to your Sam, it was while I was married, and I remember doing an ideal scene or even a living vision of my future, and that my marriage working out, and I had this whole scene about sort of having grandchildren. We were all together and we were all doing things together. And when it didn't work out, and I did end up getting a divorce, there was a part of me that was like, well, those things don't work, It's like
Oh, yeah,
I
in
wrote
there.
my ideal scene, and what's wrong with the universe? I didn't get what I wanted. But again, I'm laughing at myself because that was my limited view. Was this is what I wanted? This is what I thought was good for me. And looking back, as hard as it was to go through the divorce, which I clearly didn't want, um, but chose in the end because it was inevitable. Um, but looking back now, after these, 14 years, whatever it is, I can go, oh my God, I am in such a better place today. Life is so much better. My relationship is so much better than one I have today. But at the
Mhm.
time, I was very attached to it has to look this way. It has to look that I stay married to the father of my children and I keep an intact family. And I didn't appreciate how much better a relationship could be. And so again, went sort of reluctantly towards a divorce, but thank goodness I did, and opened up to a whole new life.
Well, that's the thing I want to say, because that's something you indicated in a sense, is oftentimes we don't know what's possible for us.
Hmm.
It's so limited, myopic, what do we call it, that we don't necessarily see what's even possible. So if we do keep it open ended at the top, sort of thing, there's in my spiritual studies of working with Agape, we were studying Ernest Holmes' teachings, and one of the books he wrote was called Open at the Top. And that understanding is like what we're looking at, there's no upper limit to what's possible. So if we are simply saying, what I want is this family dynamic and this house and this environment, or better, then it makes it open to being even better than expected. Because the thing is, again, when we get locked into a limited viewpoint, what it has to be, it can be very diminishing in a way, because we're so contracted by that.
Hmm.
And again, when we look at saying in the title, everything happens for us, not against us. If we look at everything being coming against us, we're going to be very contracted and very protective and not be willing to be open and expansive.
Yeah,
But again, when we are looking at everything happens for us, then we're like, well, if this is possible, maybe even this is possible, and even that's possible. And so we keep being willing to be shown, so to speak, by the universe, by spirit, whatever we call it, that's even better available to us
yeah.
if we're willing to be open to it.
And I really want to jump on this as what you're saying, because I think some people that are listening could interpret that as it's got to look better. Sometimes it looks worse. Sometimes it unravels and
Thank
it
you.
is shitty. And you're like, I can't believe I'm here. This is not what I signed up for. So don't, again, through our human eyes, it can look, because it certainly looked like I lost big time.
Yeah,
Now, when in time, I clearly didn't lose big time. I might have lost financially, but that's nothing compared to my happiness and to the happiness of my children and my family. But so sometimes things look worse. So just because when you say, this or something better upwards, sometimes you have to go down a bit for it to go upwards. So
I've had that. I've had that with someone when my dream car got totaled.
really,
I was so distressed by that.
yeah.
But the reality was is that if it hadn't happened, I would have been in debt for so many repairs that I'd put off and put off and put off.
Now is that
That frankly,
Is that
Total
your
was a
car with the knight in shining armor license plate that you needed
no,
to get rid of too?
that's a different story.
No,
I
different.
could talk about that one
Well, I hope that one got totaled too, because you needed to get rid of that license plate. It was not
too. Did I
serving.
get that on the podcast? I don't remember if we did that one in the previous episode,
I
but
think
just a quick,
you mentioned.
but the quick recap. Well, the quick recap. That one was because again, for us, not against us. In that instance, that was because I was clear that I had evolved beyond that personality type that I thought I had. And by declaring it, which my car had the license plate that matched my type that I was being before, when it got stolen, again, you have to watch the previous podcast, listen to the previous podcast for this one. It was such a painful experience at the time, but looking back, we're such human now, and realize I'm so grateful that the spirit was clear enough to show me it was taking that away from me, so I didn't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah,
So absolutely, it was a gift.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So many. It's so funny. It's so funny. I mean,
yeah.
I'm talking about stolen cars. I'm thinking about what actually got me to LA. I remember somebody gave me a free ticket. Basically, it was in the 80s, and it was when somebody could give you a ticket and you could get on a plane and come here without too
Hmm.
much scrutiny. But the night before I left, I had gone out with my friend, and at the time I lived on Abbey Road. We shared a flat together, and we came home and went to sleep that night. Next morning, I woke up and I'm like, where did I park my car last night? And anyway, I started walking around the block and realized my car had been stolen.
Hmm.
And we'd only just got this flat, so there was very little items in it. So when I did come to America and I decided to stay here, again, this tragedy of somebody having stolen my car was wonderful. It was like the insurance was like, here's the money. And I thought, wow, it was worth that much. So I had this little, nest egg to start my life here. And again,
Hmm.
what looked like a bad thing ended up changing the trajectory of my life. I mean, I
Yeah.
basically continued to live here after that. So yeah, I mean, I know we're being funny and flippant here and talking about stolen cars and houses and things like that, and there's some changes that are far more poignant and painful.
Hmm.
Losing a loved one for sure, but again, sometimes we have this expectation that everybody should have a long life, everybody should live this long life, and sometimes the I think some of the most impactful, special people are only here for a short time, and it's
Yeah.
and it's usually that the fact that they're only here for a short time that their impact is greater when we lose somebody that is so beautiful so young. I know that's very hard for a lot of people to see, but again, I think that that's a beautiful gift that some people only come onto this earth for a short period to teach us something and to change the world as well. I know people that have lost children who have set up foundations in their name and done incredible things in the world because of
Mhm.
this short life their loved one was here for.
Yeah. Sometimes they come in to shine the light for a brief period and then they're gone. There's, well, I mean, to quote one of my favorite authors, Richard Bach, he talks about if the way to discover if your mission on Earth is finished, if you're still here, it isn't.
Hmm.
So for some people, they do finish the mission pretty early.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as everybody has that opportunity, if you're wondering what your life's about and you don't know what your mission is, maybe it's time to find out
Mm.
because then you might notice how life changes for you, not against you.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great one, and that's another show. What is your mission? What is um,
Yeah,
that's a great one because that we can go really deep with that one. But
absolutely.
yeah, so trying to think of a few more things that have happened to you, Barry, besides your stolen cars. That
Well, well, I can put this way then. Things that happen for me, not against me.
yes.
I come into the States. I basically had um, when I was in college, I learned computers because that was the only thing available to me based on my education. And so they got me to work in the commercial computer industry. And I worked in Germany and then Belgium and then finally moved to America. When I came into America, there were six of us out of 80 something that were interviewed that got the jobs out here. Came into work in LA, 6 month contract. I didn't know what the plan was, but ultimately only one of the six was hired. It wasn't me. So at the end of 6 months, the five of us were supposed to like go back to England done. I'm like, I'm not leaving. But the thing was, getting fired, I'd made friends in LA, a place in Santa Monica called the King's Head. I bumped into these guys, made friends with them. They worked down in part of LA for another company, and they're also English, and they were getting their green cards. And so I said, look, I've been laid off. I've got to go back to England. And he said, well, you want to stay in America? Let me put your resume into our company. We'll see if we can get you hired here and get your green card. And that's what happened.
Mhm.
But the thing is that at that moment, I was just like, oh no, I've been fired. My job is over. I'm sacked. Fast forward, once I got my green card, I went freelance for a while. And I was working for aerospace companies doing computer programming down in El Segundo. And this is 84. And I was working with this guy. We've been working together for a few months. And we're having coffee down in the basement cafe one morning. And he comes in and he's like looking pretty like tired. I'm like, you been out drinking last night? You look hungover. So no, I was at a seminar.
Mhm.
I'm like, what? There's a seminar. And he told me, because I'd never aware of personal growth, anything at that point. It's my first experience of it. He said, learned some good information, met some cool people, and there's some cute women. And I said, where do I sign? Literally. And I went to the next seminar. But the thing was, if I hadn't been fired, I wouldn't have gone to this other company. I wouldn't have gone freelance, and I wouldn't have gotten to the personal growth industry, which I've been in for 40 years almost.
Mhm.
And my life changed because of that. So that simple thing, like dominoes in a way,
Yeah.
by not fighting that being fired, the gifts that came out of it have been far beyond my imagination. So yeah, being open to possibility is definitely the way to live.
Yeah, that's so great. You just reminded me the same with me. The reason I accepted the free ticket to come here to visit a friend here was because I was pissed off with my boyfriend at the time
Hmm.
in London, and it was like, well, you can do this, I can do this, and again, like, it was a gift. It was an incredible gift, and again, I often think about those. I had studied fashion design in the UK, and I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to once I graduated, I was going to go into psychology, and so I came here just on this free ticket holiday, and I was wearing something I made, and it was somebody was like, "Oh my God, you can you." They said, "Where did you get your jacket?" And I said, "Oh, I made it." And they're like, "Oh, you made it, you designed it. I can get you working in Hollywood next week." And I was like, yeah, that's just a line, but it happened, and I did, and that was my reason for staying here. Was I immediately started working in costumes and things in Hollywood. So again, exactly, just if you are ready to just go with the flow of life, and that whole I think sometimes when we have a goal over here that we keep looking at, we're just missing everything that's right in front of us. This wonderful adventure of, I always call it following the golden threads. And, our wisdom will tell us if we're way off course. We'll get some feedback to, hey, maybe this is not the thing for us, and sort of get back onto that sort of, path that is meant for us. But in general, just being so open to the adventure of life, and getting out of our own way, really getting out of our way and letting life live through us and for us, and just going on that wild ride, whatever it is.
There's something about having, I won't say a loose grip, but having a willingness to be moved the way you need to be moved versus fighting to hold on to what you're fighting onto.
Yeah.
Yes, there are certain times when you want to stand your ground, you want to say this is the way it is, the way I'm going to be. But in this conversation, the idea about how letting life work for us and work with us means we've got to be willing to dance with it.
Hmm.
And rather than, because when it's against us, we're like, we're digging our heels in and we're fighting against it. But life is a lot bigger than us in a sense.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is we're going to get pushed no matter what. So why not just go with the flow and have a lot more fun with what's happening? Because frankly, life does get a lot more fun when you're in the place of letting it happen for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm having this image of these sort of like those rapids and rocks and things in the river, and trying to swim up that river against the rapids, against the rocks. Whereas if we do just learn to flow with them, and not in too much resistance, but working with whatever that flow is, how enjoyable that ride can be. And
Absolutely.
a lot less more painful than banging and crashing your head into rocks. So
Oh yeah. I've done the rapids before. I know that experience. Definitely.
all right, then. Well, this is another great chat. Thank you so much, Barry, and thank you everyone for listening. And we will see you next week.
Absolutely. Take care of yourselves. And yeah, how can life work for you? That's a good question to ask.
Mm. All right, lovely. Well, thank you,
All right.
everyone. Bye bye.
See you later. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.